Hey guys, so in the previous lecture what we saw was how we created a quiz options component and moved all our code into the quiz options. Now we'll try to make sure that we use this quiz options dynamically and we don't have to call this 4 times versus just pass it probably a loop through it, and of course make sure the data coming from it is dynamic. So that's the goal of this lecture. Now before even moving ahead, the way we're going to pass our content to our child is very easy using properties. So let's say I have a property called as option, and I create this property, and the value, of course, I can use this riddle object right now because this is set on the state, and I have 4 options I had created. So the way I can use it is this dot state dot riddle dot, it's a results array, so that's a results array, and let me give the 0th element. So that will be my first option. Let me just copy this and make sure I add it to the others too. So this will become the first element, this will become the second element, this will become the third element. Again, no changes will happen if I save this because everything is still hard coded and everything goes to 10. Now let's go to the quiz options JS file. Let's move this to a new line so that it's a little more clear to read. And now instead of 10, we can use the property that we just passed. So the way you can use it is this dot props dot option. Let's save this, and now you should start seeing the numbers 8, 9, 10, and 11. Fantastic, right? Of course, there's a lot of work yet needed on how to randomize it, etc. But the first step of making sure that content goes dynamically, which means all you need to give this options a number and it spits out the number. Fantastic, right? Now let's go back to the quiz.js, and writing this 4 times makes no sense. Let's say if I want to add 6 options, it will get difficult, and all I need to add 2 more items into the array and the 6 items should fit in. Or probably I want to remove an option and give 3 options to the user. It's very well possible. So the way we do that is, we in JavaScript, whenever we need to loop over an array, we use a map or a for each function. When you use a map, you can return as a result. Now let's try to do that. And how will we do that? Well, the first thing is you need to iterate over the riddle. So this dot state dot riddle dot results array. So you need to iterate over this. Now let's do a dot map and let's pass the function. So the first thing we need to pass is option comma I, which is the index, and let's use the arrow function from JavaScript and create our map function. So let's go here and let's start writing what we need to return. So the thing we need to return is this quiz options. So let's just copy this out here, paste it here, and instead of results of 0, all we need to do is here pass in the option. And just one more thing important that I would like to show you. Let me just clean this up. Let me remove this, so at least we should start seeing the options. Let me save this. I hope it works. And it doesn't work because, oh, I don't need to pass in a bracket here. So let me just make sure I remove that. I remove this. I move this here, save it. And I should see 8, 9, 10, and 11. But one thing, if you just go and see the console, you should start seeing an error. And that error should say, each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. Again, if you recollect, the way we do an array is we need to make sure we pass a property called as a key, and it has to be unique when you iterate over the array. So the way you can do it is you can just pass in a key equals to, and you already have the index using the I, so you can pass in the I out here. Let's save this, and the page should refresh, and let's see the console. And the error should have vanished by now. Don't worry about this error. This is again for a plugin that I already have. Easy, right? So what we did was we made things dynamic. We made sure the quiz options component is used and it gets the data dynamically. So that was all for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, so in this lecture what we're going to see is we're going to see how we can make this a little more random and dynamically generated. Of course, it's not difficult, but we need to make sure we code it in. So let's get started. So the first thing that we have done is we have the options that we see, it's coming from this riddle object. And again, you're doing it in the constructor. So what if the user clicks on play again? Of course, you have to redo and the constructor doesn't get called again. So let's do one thing is let's try to create this as a reusable function so that whenever even we do a play game click again, the options get rendered too. So how we can do that is let's move this entire thing into a function. Let's say play game. Now let's just create the play game. And from here, let's return the same object, for instance. Nothing has changed, everything works the same. Let's refresh it and everything is still the same. So all we did was we moved the constructor logic to a method. Now let's try to make sure that we dynamically generate this content. So let's do one thing is let's just store this in a variable. Let's say riddle equals to whatever we just had, and let's return the riddle. Okay, again everything remains the same, nothing changes. Now before even getting started, let's make sure we have this generated dynamically, which means a random number is needed, and of course we can give the range to a random number. So in JavaScript, which is plain JavaScript, you can create a random number method, which is random number, and here you can just say it accepts min comma max because you need to pass in a range. And the way you can return is you return math dot floor because you need to make sure it's the lower number, math dot random into max minus min plus 1, and once you do that I just need to do a plus 1 so that it also includes the max. Oh, I think this should be min, so let's make sure that's corrected. Now once we have the random number, let's just do a random number on the console. So every time I get called console.log say random this dot random number. Okay, oops, let's save this and let's call this 2 times so at least we can see that we have 2 numbers generated. Let's also pass in a range. Let's say we pass 20 to 50. Same here, 20 to 50. Now let's go to the console and let's see if we get our 2 numbers. So we got 44 and 43, random enough. So let's try to store this as field 1 and field 2. So we got our first set of numbers. Let field 1 is equals to this dot random number 20 comma 50. Let's store a new number onto the field 2. And you can also store the result, which is very easy. So result is equals to field 1 plus field 2. Let's update these fields. So this becomes field 1. This becomes field 2. And this becomes result. I think that is an exception. Let's see what the problem is. This dot random number is not a function. Oh, there's a typo here. It's random DOM. How dumb. Okay, the page refreshes. Let's go to the console and make sure our random numbers are still intact. So 20 and 46. Let's just remove this. We don't need this anymore because the random numbers would be different. Let's just print out the riddle. So riddle riddle console log. Page should refresh and you should start seeing an object out here. Fantastic. So you see an array which has 4 options. Of course it is hard coded, and then you see 2 numbers which is 22 and 40, and the answer is 62. So the first step of doing the math is done. Now the only thing that is remaining is generating the random number of options. So let me take a step back and recap what we have done, because I don't want you to get lost. Okay. So the first thing that we have done is we move the riddle object into its own function or a method called play game, where we created or sent the riddle object as an output. Now when we did that, we also wrote another implementation which is generating a random number, which is very easy in JavaScript. Now I also passed in a range which is between 20 and 50, so that my random numbers are always in that range. The next thing we did was we did a sum and make sure our riddle object got updated with these options. The only thing that remains is generating this randomly. And now that we already have the field 1 and the field 2, why not let's just update it in the question itself. So instead of this 5 hard coded, let's try to do it this dot state dot riddle dot, and the next thing is field 1. Let me copy this and I can go here, replace the other 5 with the field 2. Make sure it has the brackets and let's save it. So you can see every time I refresh the page, I should see a new set of random numbers. So step 1 done. In the next lecture, what we will see is how to make sure these are randomly generated and they fall in a range so that they do not go negative, they do not have decimals, and they have the right numbers and they are not duplicates. So the way we will do it is I'll show in the next class. Okay. Hey guys, so far what we have is we have our basic skeleton ready. We have generated these numbers dynamically, and we also have a child component quiz options created. Now we need to make sure these options are randomly generated. They are in the right order or probably shuffled so that we can use them correctly. Now the way we can do it is we can just call in or create another function that can be called to generate this array altogether. So the way we can do it is generate random options. Okay. Now the way I think of generating this random options is these random options should also be closer to the result, and so it can expect the sum or the result as an input. So let's just store that. Constant let result is equals to sum. Okay. Then we also need to make sure we return a results array from this function. So let's just make sure we have an empty array to start with, and let's just go and return that results array so that we already know what our function needs to do. Now instead of getting this results array from here, let's make sure we have a results array is equals to this dot generate random options, and we pass in the result. Easy, right? So far nothing will happen, everything will stay the same. Now that we have come in here, we need to make sure we generate the random number. But the way I think of generating this random number is very easy. We generate a set of 4 random numbers and we either add or subtract to it depending on an option. So we have already written a number method which is randomizing the number. Where did it go? It is here. So you can use this method to generate a flag saying true or a false, which is 0 or a 1. And once you do that, you can decide which sign it is, positive or negative. So let's just quickly write that. So if, let's say, let at subtract field is equals to this dot random number, and you pass in the value 0 and 1. So it will always return a 0 or a 1. So you know what happens. Now if add subtract value is triple equals to, let's say, a 1, you do an addition. So let's say add the number to the result. Similarly, if it is not, you subtract the number from the result. Subtract the number from the result. Does it make sense? So what we will do is we'll have a sum and we'll try to add random numbers to it, and addition or subtraction is also a sign of randomness, which means it can be anything. So you will not always get a plus plus plus, you will get a range, which means 2 down or 1 up and so on and so forth. So the 3 numbers that get generated randomly other than the answer will either have a positive value or a negative value, which will be lower or the higher number than the result. Okay, now that's there. Now how do you generate a random number to be added or to be deleted or probably removed from this number? And of course this has to be smaller than the result. So the way we can do it is we can write one more array, which is let random number array is equals to, we haven't generated anything yet, but it's an initialization. Now let's write a while loop and make sure that we have at least 3 numbers, which is random number array dot length is greater than, actually it's less than or equal to 3. Alright, so the first thing we do is let random number, so we go in a loop when make sure that the random number array has at least 3 elements and say this is equals to this dot random number again, and now we pass in a value or a range of numbers that can be added or subtracted. Now if you recollect, the first time when we generated these random numbers, we choose a range of 20 to 50. Now this gives us a non-colliding or a non-intersecting range, which means we can use numbers 1 to 19 to make sure the numbers are intact. And anyways, if these numbers are 20, 20 also, the maximum result will be 40. And if you add any random number to 20, it will definitely be less than 40. So that ways you can avoid any negative numbers. So if you subtract something, it will never be less than the result. And I'll show you that when we play around with it. Let's make sure we got the number. Now we need to make sure that this number is unique. So how do we do that? We check the random array, and again when in the random array we check the index of, and we see index of is greater than -1. So whatever you're trying to see or the number that you're trying to see, random array, random number, this is greater than -1. If it is, then you continue, you do not do anything. But if it is not, what you can do is you can add that to the random array, this dot push, and you can pass in the random number. Let's save it. Let's do a console.log random number array so that we can see what this array is every time we refresh it. Let's go and see the console. Let's refresh, and it says not a number, not a number, not a number, which means there is a problem somewhere because I did not pass in the min and the max. So let's make sure we pass in the min, which is 1, and the max, which is 19, and it is less than 20. Now we have 4, 19, 5, 13. Let's refresh. 6, 16, 10, 4. Now I'll show you another thing. Let me just comment this out and run this again. So now there is a possibility of numbers being overwritten. Let's keep refreshing, and I'm sure some of the random numbers will be the same in this array. Very bleak chance, but here it is. You can see 16 and 16. So this line will avoid having the same number again and again in the random numbers too. Let's save this. Now comes the addition or the subtraction. So all we need to make sure is now I have 4 elements out here, and I need to make sure I go through this loop 3 times to add and subtract to get a result array. So let's write a for loop. So for let I is equals to 0, I is less than 3, I plus plus, and you can go in. Now in this we can just add this random logic so it happens 3 times. You get that? So because we need 3 times. And now here we will also make sure that we have whatever we had the result, which was here, we do a plus equals to whatever is the random number in the array at that particular element. So let's say whatever is I, this will be the random number. Similarly for subtraction we will use a minus. Now let me tell you what I'm trying to do here again. So first thing, we need to make sure that we'll go through this loop 3 times. So that's why we created a for loop, which means we already have 1 as a result and the rest of the 3 elements need to be generated. We got this random array which is 0, 1, 2 and 3 because it has to be 3 or less than 3 length. So you have 3 random numbers which is less than 20 and you can add it to the random number results, which means you can add it to the result or you can subtract it from the result depending on this random number. Make sense? So let me show you an example. Let's say my result is, let's take the same example where my field was 5 and 5 and the result was 10. Now when the result was 10, let's say 10 got passed in here and 3 random numbers got generated. Now these numbers, let's say it is 1, 2 and 3. Okay. Now when you go in here, what will happen is you loop through this array 3 times. And every time you loop through it, it will give you a flag of 0 or 1 for this field. Which means either it will tell you add a number or subtract a number. So let's say the first time you go in, it says add a number. So this will be 1. When you go in, the random number that was there at the 0th position, it was 1. So when you do a result, which was the 10 plus equal to random number of I, which was 1, it makes it 11. So your first option would be 11. Similarly, the next time you go, let's say it is subtraction and the second random number was 2. So it will be result, which is 10 minus 2, which will make it 8. So the next option would be 8. And similarly, the third option, if it comes as positive, it will be 10 plus 3, which is 13. Does it make sense? Yes. If not, rewind the video, go back and see the logic again. And if you still have a question, let me know in the Q&A section. Now moving ahead, we have the result. Let's make sure we populate the result, which is this result. It gets updated every time. Let's make sure we do this inside the loop, because if we do not do it inside the loop, the same result will carry forward. So now I move the result into the for loop. Now once I do that, I can add it to the results array. All I need to do is push result and bam, my result array should be ready. Let me remove this and let me make sure I do a console log of results array. Let's remove this. We don't need this anymore. Let's refresh the page and now you can see I have 3 random numbers, which is 90, 89 and 95. Of course, the numbers are 37 and 43. So the total itself is 90. Actually, it's 80. So the total is 80. So the fourth number has to be 80. Let's refresh the page and you will see 3 more random numbers. Refresh it, you see 3 random numbers. Does it make sense? I know this was a little complicated logic, but we just need to get it straight. It's all randomizing it and making sure that we do not step on our foot. Now we have the results array return. Let's save it and let's go back here. So my result array has 3 elements. You can see console log is not yet here. So let's just add it. Console.log results array. Fantastic. Good. I have 57, 65 and 85 random numbers. Now I need to make sure my sum or the total is also added to this array. That it's very easy. All I need to do is once I have the array, I just need to do a results array dot push the result or the sum. Let's save it. And now I should see 4 elements. Out of that, 1 is the answer. So 50 plus 43 is 93. You see that? That's the answer. Easy, right? Now I can also randomize it. It's very easy because the order of this can be always the 4th element is the answer. So every time I refresh, the 4th element will be the answer. In this case, 90. If I refresh it, it's again the 79. So it doesn't make sense and it's all in the order. So let's try to randomize it. So the way we can do this is, what we can do is we can do a results array dot sort and randomize this by adding a function A comma B, and then return a function that will return 0.5 minus math.random, and this should give me the resulted array, which is sorted. So again, in this scenario, 23, 28, 51 is the answer. Let's refresh. 46, it's still 80, because let's just save it, refresh the page. You can see 41, 44, the answer is 85, but 85 is in the center and the other numbers are randomized. So it's very easy. Now all I need to make sure is, instead of this hard-coded array, replace it with my results array. Let's save it, and you can actually start seeing the numbers out here. So 32 and 46, and that will be 78, and this is on the third position, so it is randomized and there are numbers around it. Similarly, if I refresh the page again, the answer is 81. Similarly, let's refresh. 25 and 37 is 62, and it's on the fourth position, and there are some random numbers. 45 and 50 is 95, then there are 3 options. 27 and 41, it's 8 and 6, 68, third option. So again, this is all random, and the numbers are always the sum of. Of course, there are a lot of things that have gone in, so I would say if you need to revise or return to the video, go do that. And if you have any questions, ask me in the Q&A section. We will continue our game development in the next lecture.